So as state biologist for NRCS, I work with wildlife habitat, I work to protect threatened and endangered species, and I work to protect wetlands throughout Georgia. My journey to become a state biologist began when I was in college. I first thought that I wanted to be a veterinarian, and so I went to school for veterinary science, animal science. And I did a lot of internships in college with veterinarians, and then I also did a wildlife conservation internship in Kenya where I helped record different wildlife species in Kenya and lived with the Masai tribe for a summer. And that internship in particular made me decide that I really wanted to work in conservation. So after college, I worked with a state agency as a forester, and then I decided I really wanted to work for NRCS. So I started out in the field and I worked my way up, and I worked in several states. I worked in South Carolina, Vermont, New Hampshire, and now Georgia, and to become the state biologist of Georgia. Some of the priority resource concerns we address with our partners are we have partners that are very interested in game species that we work with the state and also with Quail Forever. So these partners help us protect bobwhite quail, deer, and turkey habitat, among others. We also have a lot of partners that are interested in gopher tortoise conservation. Gopher tortoise is a species that is a candidate to be listed as endangered in the United States, and so we in Georgia are trying to locate all the gopher tortoise populations so that we have an adequate representation of the amount of gopher tortoises that we have in Georgia so that we can prevent the species from getting listed as endangered. So pollinators are one of my big passions. Pollinators are very, very important because they provide our food sources. A lot of our vegetables and fruits rely on pollination to grow their fruit. So without them, we wouldn't have a lot of our food source. As you can see, there are a lot of pollinators flying around me, a lot of bees, and we have a lot of different types of bees. So we have just the normal pollinators that you think of would be a bumblebee. These bumblebees are not native to the US. They are brought in from other countries, but we do have a lot of native bees as well. And so some of the native bees that we have work specifically on different fruit and vegetable species to pollinate them. So for instance, we have the squash bee, which pollinates squash plants. And then we have the southern blueberry bee, which pollinates blueberries. We also have other types of pollinators as well. We have butterflies, we have wasps, beetles, bats, birds, flies. There are a lot of different other species that do pollinate besides bees. Pollinators can act as predators, but they can also get predated on by other wildlife. So for instance, quail really need insects as part of their food source. So a lot of people who are interested in preserving quail habitat will plant pollinator habitat along the edges of their fields, and they call this bugging habitat. And so the quail then have insects right there available to them to predate on. So bees and other pollinators are very important for pollination of crops, but they're also important as beneficial insects. And so beneficial insects are insects that help natural pest pressure, and so they act as predators for our pests on our crops. And things that we can do to enhance these beneficial insects are planting cover crops like this crimson clover. So this crimson clover, you would plant this in the fall. It grows and it overwinters and it covers the ground. And so by doing that, it's maintaining a nice habitat, a nice cool soil, and allows for beneficial insects like beetles to live underneath. And so after we will get rid of this crimson clover and we'll plant crops like this is actually a collard crop that has gone to seed, which is providing some nice pollinator habitat for some of these bees. That's a native bee right there. And so once we get rid of this clover, we're going to plant crops like collards, and then we already have the beneficial insects in the soil. So if we get any pests on that collards, then those beneficial insects are right there, and they're able to then help predate on those pests without using pesticides.